Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am working on a 2017 Toyota Tacoma, and I am going to be replacing the front struts with a adjustable Bilstein 5100. These struts are a great choice if you want to lift your vehicle and also gain a little bit of travel. The first thing I do before I lift one of these is take measurements from the ground to the wheel well, center with the wheel, before and after putting the lift kit on. The rear end is about an inch higher than the front, but the customer wants the front higher than the rear, so we're going to set this up as a 2-inch lift. The first thing you need to do is lift and support the vehicle, and then take off the tires. The next thing we're going to do is disconnect both sway bar links where they attach to the knuckle. Now I'm going to remove the clip from the castle nut on the upper ball joint, and then if you swing the sway bar link down, you can get easier access to the upper ball joint nut. But before we separate the upper ball joint, we're going to unhook the ABS wire from the upper control arm and from the knuckle so it doesn't get damaged when we separate the ball joint. You can now separate the upper ball joint from the knuckle by using a separator or smack it with a hammer. Leave the nut on a few turns to protect the threads while hitting it with a hammer, and also to keep everything from flying apart once it separates. Now we can remove the 3 nuts from the top of the strut. They should be a 14mm. We can then remove the lower nut and bolt. At this point, with both sway bar links disconnected, we can rotate the sway bar out of our way to remove the strut. Once it's in the up position, you can lightly press up on the upper control arm and slide the strut out. And now we can get the new struts laid out with the correct height selected and get them ready to install. You should have 2 new struts, 2 of the lower spring perches, 4 of the bushing washers, 2 bushings, and 2 top nuts. The washers on the left are for installing on the bump stops of a TRD Pro. And now you have to decide how high you want the front end. This vehicle, we wanted the front higher than the rear, and it is a 4-wheel drive V6 long bed truck, so we used the 5th position to give us about 2 inches of lift. After you move the snap ring into the desired position, make sure it is fully seated or strut damage will occur once you start driving the vehicle. And once you have all that done, install the lower spring perch on top of that snap ring and make sure it's fully seated. If you don't have access to a strut compressor, then you can take your new struts and your old struts to a mechanic for this next part. If you do have access to a strut compressor, remember to read all the safety instructions, as this part could be dangerous. I compress the spring until there's just a little bit of play at the lower spring perch before removing the top nut off the strut.
I have no way of putting the piece in there that's supposed to hold that spring in a decent place. Because I either gotta take the safety all the way out.
Once we have the old strut removed from the spring, we can install the new strut. So we will install one of the bushing washers on top of the strut, before sliding it up into the coil. The factory has a bushing that is glued or molded into the strut mount, so we only have to replace the upper bushing and then install the other new washer on top of that, followed by the new nut. Impact use is not recommended on installing these, so we are going to use 2 wrenches, one to hold the center shaft from moving and the other wrench to tighten the nut down. Now, before removing spring tension from the strut compressor, we need to line up the strut with the strut mount. So you'll have one hole that's offset away from you that goes towards the inside of the vehicle, and we need to make sure that the lower mounting hole is in a position where we can get the bolt in. Once that's lined up, go ahead and remove tension from the spring. And then we can reinstall the strut back in the vehicle. If the new strut is longer than the old strut, then you will probably have to use a prybar, screwdriver, or like I use, a heel bar with a pointed end to line up the lower mounting hole. So pry down on the lower control arm and slide the lower mounting bolt in and put the nut back on. The upper control arm will have to be pried down to hook to the knuckle. I stick the pry bar in onto the cross bolt next to the strut and push down. And now we can start tightening up the suspension components on this side. When you tighten the upper ball joint, it has a castle nut that a cotter pin goes through. So as you tighten it, you have to look and make sure that the hole lines up with one of the slots in the nut, and then you can reinstall the cotter pin. Before you install the sway bar end link, make sure that you have both sides fully assembled so the sway bar is out of the way for the other side. And reattach the ABS wires to the control arm and to the knuckle. And now we can finish tightening up the rest of the mounting hardware, the lower bolt and nut, the sway bar end links, and the strut mount nuts. We can reinstall the wheels and tires, put the lug nuts on and snug them up, and then lower the vehicle on the ground and use a torque wrench to tighten the lug nuts to the proper spec. Once that is done, you need to drive the vehicle on a few bumps to settle the suspension, and then you can compare your original measurements to the new measurements. And as you can see, the rear stayed about the same, and the front we gained 2 inches with this kit. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button. If you have friends with a Tacoma and they're planning on putting a lift on, go ahead and share this video with them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.